Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Game Logic from the Routing Off Infinity Gaming channel on YouTube, one of the co-hosts of the Enough to Keep Going Weekly Games podcast on the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube, back with another episode of the Enough to Keep Going Weekly Games podcast. This is episode number 377 for the 2nd of March, 2025. Here with me, as always, I have my stalwart partner in crime, Mr. DBQ Hams. How you doing, DB?
Whew, that's a nice energy to bring tonight. Nice job. Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Glad to talk about some games. It's been a good week of lots of releases and lots of time in front of a screen.
It has, and it is about to get even busier as we head into March. The year has gotten off to a good clip already very early on, and it's not showing any signs of slowing down. So without much further ado, let's get to it. So in segment one, our main gamer experience stories for the evening, we're going to kick things off with DBQ's game, which is on mobile, DBQ.
I know it is, right? I don't have a big, I've been playing some stuff on console, but actually a lot of my time since midweek has been spent with New Star Games, a new release. So New Star Games, the makers of Retro Bowl and Retro Bowl College Bowl and Retro Goal, the soccer. So and last year in our superlatives, one of my games that I called out was New Star GP, the kind of Sega Rally, Sega Saturn-esque in terms of graphics, in terms of F1 racing. And so I knew Retro Slam Tennis was coming out. This is on mobile, both iOS and Android. It is played in portrait, or it's played kind of vertical in its vertical mode. It captures many of the same kind of simplicities but core essentials of the game that other New Star games do, which is great. And I've played, you go through and you have 27 weeks in a season, in a season or a year of tennis. And if you're in the top 8, you get a championship at the end. You have Grand Slam events. You have events that are worth different amounts of points. You have 250, 500, and 1,000, and occasionally a 2,000 point event in there as well. All that works really well. You kind of go through it. It simulates some of the game, and then at key moments, it kind of drops you in, and you are dragging on the screen to set the power and direction of the shot. And then a tennis ball flies up across the screen or kind of floats by, depending on the difficulty of the shot or depending on your stats. It may be smaller or bigger. If you're playing in a tense situation, it kind of vibrates a little bit and kind of delays its timing. If you're playing in an easy match, it kind of just floats across in a big ball. And then similar to tennis, depending on where you hit the ball, you're going to slice it. You're going to, you can have it cut different directions, put some topspin or backspin on it, which is enjoyable, right? Like there's a lot of, this is a lot of me talking about what I enjoy about the game, only to say, unfortunately, this is the most mobile-like game that New Star has created. Like with Retro Goal, with Retro Bowl, you can pay to get bucks that allow you to, in-game currency, which allows you to hire coaches or hire different players. Here you have in-game currency, which doesn't really serve any purpose except to purchase in-game things that boost your lifestyle meter, that boost your followers, which then increases your money. You also have a stamina meter. And the stamina meter kind of, you get green is full, orange, yellow is 75%, orange is 50%, red is 25%. And that stamina meter it impacts what happens when the game is simulated. So if you have full stamina, that you are more likely to be up when you get control later in a set or later in a match. Where if you're low on stamina, you're more likely to fall behind in a game. And you have energy drinks, which you can earn occasionally in the game by doing a couple mini challenges, or by you have a coach that you hire, and if you meet the coach's challenge, like win on a grass court or win 250 dollars of prize money, if you do that, they award you a can, which can be 25% recovery, 50, 75 to 100. Or you can just buy cans with real money. So there's no way in game to buy cans to replenish your stamina. And unlike kind of many other full on mobile games, free to play mobile games, your stamina doesn't recharge over time. That if you are running low and you set it down, your stamina is going to refill after 12 hours. That doesn't happen in this game. So what ends up happening is you're playing to try to get the types of shots that complete your coach's contract in order to get energy drinks. You are often playing from behind or you can be playing from behind because if you're not spending money on the energy drinks. Which to me it feels really kind of forced in the microtransactions of like, there's no other way you can rest. That's the other way. You can rest during a week, which doesn't allow you to go to an event or earn any more points, and you earn back, recover 25% of your stamina. But if you're traveling around the world, depending on how far, which again, all these mechanics are really nice if there was a way to earn stamina outside of real money purchases, or enough. So if I rested and my last tournament was in the United States, but my next tournament is in Beijing, then that could take 15% off my stamina just to travel there. And so then as you're going through round after round, usually 4 rounds, sometimes 5 rounds, in a Grand Slam event, there can be up to 8 rounds. Each round, you are going to lose a little bit of your stamina. And you're leveling up. And so that you're leveling up, you can put points into spin, speed, power, fitness. And if you're putting it into fitness, your decrease in stamina goes down. You use the in-game currency to buy clothing, which can give you small boosts, like a one block boost. If you have 5 total blocks of fitness, you can have a clothing that will give you 1 additional block boost, which slows down your slows down your stamina decreasing. So the game itself, the actual playing of the game, is really kind of fun. It's a lot of kind of trying to catch the other side of a court. You move around kind of automatically, and the tracking is pretty good. If your speed is up, you're going to track better. As you start off, you track pretty slowly. It really just comes down to the challenge of feeling forced to, if you want to keep playing, feeling forced to, buy in-game currency or buy in-game purchases. So, I think one thing that I first thought, because I eventually put down $5 and $6 or whatever and bought the pack of, and I've done the full purchase for Retro Bowl and Retro Goal in the past, so I didn't feel bad about giving this developer $5. But if I didn't have that, I'd be resting a lot more. I wouldn't be progressing as quickly in terms of leveling up. And what I'm now finding in year 4 is, as you age, you also are losing some of those skill points that you earned through leveling up. So you're right, like you've got to continue to level up to even just hold even, which at some point, like 10 years in, yeah, I could see that. If you're starting to like in Madden or many other sports game franchises that, after you get past your prime, you start to decrease a little bit year over year. But to have it happen in year 4 feels a little rushed. So again, this is all coming out within the first week. I mean, Retro Bowl, which came out in 2020, has continued to see updates. So it's possible that some of these things kind of get balanced out. I certainly could see them doing something that it kind of offsets some of the microtransactions. Right now, there's a couple of glitches and bugs with certain shots, but it's a really enjoyable game. It just is wrapped in a very mobile wrapper this time, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, I think it bears to say that the game is free to play, right? So you've put in $5, but yeah, I mean, there was no cover
No,
charge
there's
to
no
get into the
upfront.
bar.
Yeah, it is free to play. And again, this is why I don't feel bad. I was very glad to give the developer some money because it was free to play. It is free to play. So it's not something you would need to spend money on. It would just really kind of slow down the pace of the game and I will admit, right, if I hadn't played other New Star games where you just can play season after season, game after game, season after season, once you've purchased the $3 or $5 to unlock the whole thing, I wouldn't feel like, oh yeah, okay, so this is the game I play one match and sit for a little bit. Like, there could be ways to kind of offset that if I didn't necessarily dive in as hard as I did.
So you talked a little bit about player progression. Is there anything in the game outside of things you have to get for the purposes of like leveling up? So are there like achievements or any type of like kudos, or like on iOS especially, is it like feeding into like your gamer score or whatever on iOS?
I've been playing it on Android. I haven't popped any, like, I won a Grand Slam. I didn't pop any kind of Google achievements there either. So I don't know. The previous games in the New Star series haven't had, and I've played them both on Android and iOS, I don't remember them being tied in. I think the one that came out on Apple Arcade at the Retro Bowl 25 has some Apple achievements in there, but the other ones haven't been built in with that. They do have some in-game achievements of, hitting certain benchmarks and goals, and you kind of have a list of all the potential coach goals that you could hit. But there's no real incentive there. I mean, this is a game that there's a lot of layers and systems to it. So not only are you playing, but I was saying, you have clothing that can boost your stats. You have lifestyle purchases that can boost your followers, which will increase your money. You also have coach goals, but you also have a happiness meter where you have to balance, friends and family. And if you get into a relationship, that you have to kind of keep that happiness meter up. And if those happiness meters aren't high or over 50%, you're more likely to start to come out of the simulated part of the game down. So you have incentive there to keep those high. And this goes back to the stamina of, if you want to spend time with friends or family, it costs you 25% of your stamina. So there's a lot of things that kind of chip away at your stamina if you're trying to balance all the game systems itself. Yep, there's the game itself. Thanks for pulling up. It feels very much almost like a Super Slam Tennis on the Super Nintendo. It definitely, the tennis piece, they nail it really well. So there's what you're seeing. If for those who are viewing it, you see a little bit of the kind of meter. For those that are not, we've got an image up here that just kind of goes through some of the different stat increases and what some gameplay looks like. Again, it's free on Android and iOS. If you enjoy tennis or are tennis curious, it's free. Give it a shot. If you've played some other New Star games, definitely this is on your radar. I encourage you to check it out, but also it doesn't feel nearly as complete of a self-contained game as the other New Star games do.
So going back to my question about like achievements or anything that like pops, like in Retro Bowl, you have the thing where like, longest pass ever thrown 82 yards, right? And that's available somewhere in some menu for you to look at.
Yep. Yeah. Those are kind of your in-game achievements. Yeah. Right now, this doesn't have that, like serve an ace or, hit a, those kind of all fall in with the coach, like, have a 10 volley or have 3 comeback points or, save a match, those type of things, which would normally seem to pop inside of, your longest running play or your longest touchdown. Those come up in the coaches and aren't kind of freestanding.
Okay. This game mechanic where I'm trying to see if it comes up on screen again, where like it seems like right here, like the input, which is the game kind of pauses for a second, you pick a direction and pick a power. Is it like that all the time, or is there never just straight up like volley back and forth?
That is
Real
your
time.
interaction, is
Okay.
like the thing kind of pauses, slows down. It slows down. It's not a complete pause because as you're kind of adjusting, your opponent will be moving. So the longer you take to kind of set your angle or your power, your opponent may get into position or be closer to position. Where if you can do it quickly, you can catch them out of position. To me, it feels very much like when you shoot in retro goal, you're dragging back and everything kind of everything slows down. In you know in retro bowl, you get that same kind of pullback, but you don't have the pause, right? When you throw in retro bowl, everybody is still kind of running and moving. It doesn't slow down as much. So yeah, there is not a kind of a immediate interaction of kind of volleying back and forth.
And that it actually puts like it's going to sound maybe weird for a mobile game, but it actually puts a little bit of immersion in there for people who actually play tennis, because you will sometimes, like if you're in position, you will sometimes hold like when you specifically hit that volley, right? So you can so you can see which way your opponent moves because they're assuming that you're going to hit it right on the right hand side of the court, and then you whip it back to the left. So
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
I appreciate
the
that.
things I like in it is that that does create a lot of potential for strategy, right? Like you can be playing against where your opponent's moving, the angles, the spin really affects it, and so there's lots of different kind of strategy pieces in here that make the actual on court really enjoyable. It's some of the other stuff outside of the court and some of the systems which are less so.
So my only other question on this is, and I know you said they don't have in-game achievements. Anything like global leaderboards or ranking or any kind of?
It's an offline game even. I mean, there's nothing. Yeah, it is. All of the retro ones have been offline as well. So there's nothing here at this point. Again, it's early. It would be interesting to see if they add anything, as if this does well for them, if they continue to support it, as they have with some of their other ones.
Okay, very cool. Anything else on that one,
No,
TV?
it's a lot of time for a free mobile game. So thanks
Yeah.
for indulging my sports.
Oh no, not at all. So my game in segment one this week that I've spent the most time in this week, amongst all the newer games that I'm playing, was surprisingly Sniper Elite Resistance. So this game came out at the end of January. It's a sequel to Sniper 5.
Okay,
So I
I was
guess
going
it's
to ask
this.
when the release was. Yep.
Yeah. So I guess it's about the sixth game in the series. Surprisingly enough, while this has been one of the games that I've spent my most time in, it is not doing great on Steam reviews. Steam reviews, right? Community reviews right now showing up at 68%. I'm kind of in a phase where I am looking at Steam reviews as not being the gospel, as I have often in the past. But if you've ever played any of the Sniper Elite games before, it is what I want to say. I mean, it's so first of all, the game's fun, right? And
These are kind of very tactical to some degree as well, right? Like
it's
not a complete tactical, but they're not a. It's not a first-person shooter in the same way as the kind of a run and gun.
it's very much leans in the direction of a Metal Gear Solid, of Splinter Cell, not as abusive in terms of like extreme precision and stealth as Splinter Cell was. But yeah, it's I mean,
You get like the breathing and the gun sway, like with you get. I mean, I'm trying to remember some of the other sniper games. You get some of those kind of realistic aspects in it as well.
yeah, I don't I personally feel like the physics model in this one is not as extreme. There's another sniper game that I think sometimes we get not us, not you, get a little confused. There's the Sniper Ghost Warrior series, which I think does do a lot more of that in terms of physics. This is which is a modern era sniper game. This is modeled on World War II. So a lot of the criticisms about
I think that's what I'm thinking of. Yep.
Yeah. So a lot of the criticisms about it are a little threadbare on kind of the plot and the story, and because a lot of people have felt like the mission structures haven't been that complicated. Hitman is the other series that I was thinking in my head that I would say this is analogous to. And so I mean there is a little bit of that, but if you're a big first person shooter fan, if if you're looking to get a lot out of hardware, because I'm playing on PC, I think this is a solid title. Not here arguing for it to be game of the year or anything, but it sets out to do a certain thing. And I think it pretty much does that. There are some. I mean, in general, I feel like I mean and people who listen to the show for a while know that I'm not a huge stealth fan. I would, in general, typically will not play a game that is heavily based on stealth, with a couple of rare exceptions. And so, what I do like in this game is that there is some balance in your ability to fend for yourself. Right, one of the things I hate in stealth games is you have to play stealth, and if you ever break stealth, then you just get swarmed to a point where you're overwhelmed and you have 0% chance of ever surviving.
There's no recovery aspect. It's kind of a complete fail state. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So those types of things I'm not a huge fan of. In this one, and it depends on how you scale the difficulty level, but you're very competent and very capable in a firefight. And so and you get a lot of weapons. I think that's probably one of the biggest things is you get a lot of different tools and a lot of different ways to approach missions and to approach takedowns. You have your sniper rifle, obviously. You also get a pistol with a silencer, and then you get a submachine gun. And that's your typical loadout. And as you go on and get access to additional weapons, then you can mix that up a little bit. Enemies will drop weapons, and so you can always pick those up and use them until the ammo runs out, basically. And then you'll throw it down. And so essentially you can go through the game with 4 weapons at a time. But then you get a ton of additional equipment. You get non-lethal booby traps that are essentially proximity mines that will take people out. I haven't even used those yet, so I've had them in my inventory, but I haven't used them. You get real mines, proximity mines. You get mines that are desensitized so that they're really for use against vehicles. And so I have had a mission where there's been I've had 2 missions where there's been like patrol vehicles going around, like a World War II era kind of version of like a Humvee, and then like Nazi patrols on like motorcycles. And so you can put the mine down for that. You can booby trap bodies, which is one of my favorite things to do. So when you take somebody out, you can then, if you have any type of explosive device, and your explosive devices include those mines, but they also include 3 different types of grenades, and You get satchel charges, and I think there's one other type of explosive. So at any time you can have like a ton of explosives on you.
That's a pretty big kind of portfolio of weapons there.
It is like the weapon wheel on this thing is like 9 or 10 segments. And there's no, like, everything is its own inventory. So any notion of a cap is always specific to that thing. Which is different than, say, Avowed, right? Which I'm also playing, and we're going to talk about a little later, which has encumbrance, right? And so you can max out on the total stuff you can carry because it's looking at the aggregate. So so in that way, it's very fun. And like I said, I'm not certain if as you scale, additional difficulties that may become more restrictive, um, but you can booby trap bodies so that when you take a person out and then like a German comes up to like check on their friend to see, are they dead or something happened to them, then they also get blown up. Um, and so when you take enemies out, you can loot them, you can carry their bodies and dispose of them. So it has that same type of mechanic like Assassin's Creed. And if I didn't mention before, I think I mentioned before that Hitman was the other kind of series franchise game that I think of when I'm playing this. So just in the same way with Hitman, you can dispose of bodies. And one of the things that I love about this as a stealth game is I seem to always have this, like, stealth games seem to always be very poor about dropping bodies, meaning
Hmm.
you can walk up to a ledge, with, say, like a rooftop, right, with like a sloping roof, like where there's a horizontal ledge, but then there's a sloping roof away from it, and like you seem to not be able to do anything with the body but like drop it immediately in front of you, so that like you can't like toss bodies off the edge, or like that some, seemingly a problem. This one does a really good job of having a throw mechanic for the bodies that is distinct and separate from just dropping the
Hmm.
body. And so you can pick up a body. I've had a couple of missions that have been on rivers, right? And I've been able to go and like drop the body in the river, or have had them up on an elevated roof and been able to drop them below where I can see there's tall grass, right, for cover. So it does a pretty good job of that. I think the couple things that are kind of some ragged edges are it sound is a little wonky to me. I have had in this
In terms of accuracy, like it doesn't give you kind of proximity, or just the Foley work and the sound in terms of doesn't feel as authentic.
the sound physics wind up performing in ways that to me don't feel consistent.
Hmm.
And so I have had an instance where I've had a silenced weapon and fired it, and then I get a pop-up alert that says gunshot heard. I'm like, well, then why did you put a silencer on the weapon? Like,
What's the point of a silencer then?
right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Hey, Warwana, checking into the chat. Thanks so much for coming through. We appreciate you. Um, so there's that. Spatial audio to me is not that great. For somebody who, until up until recently was playing tons and tons and tons of Call of Duty, where you're hyper dependent upon sound and audibility and being able to tell, where people are coming. This one, particularly when you're hunkered down in a building, maybe the enemies are on alert, maybe, and it's multi levels or outside. Like, it's really hard to tell, is that coming from somebody who's outside? Like, somebody who's outside when the side of the building is stone should sound distinctly different from a person who's inside a library with you. And that should sound distinctly different if they're on the other side of a bookcase from you, or if they're upstairs or downstairs. And they
Have
all
you
kind of
played
sound. Yeah, go ahead.
have you played other games in the series? Is this something that is just a kind of a normal deficit in the series, or does this feel like I mean, what you're describing feels almost like early sound work, right? Like it's not completely synced up.
I think it's a matter of maybe like the budget on this game didn't allow them, right, to do as much stuff like in a studio, right? Because studio time costs, and that drives things. So maybe how they capture the sound, it didn't sound right. Maybe they just don't have like the best audio engineer or audio design. I'm not sure. But the differentiation in spatial sound for things like that, I find that there's not a wide enough variance. So but no, I've only played Sniper Elite 5. Um, for any significant amount, and I don't remember having that much of a problem on Sniper Elite 5. But I feel like, at least what I can remember from playing from Sniper Elite 5, I feel like a lot more of the missions were based on outdoor environments, and there weren't as many interior environments. That's one thing I'll say about the mission structure is, like, two of the missions I've had, like, you're entering a Nazi stronghold, so it is essentially a military installation. And I'm like, and for everything, quite frankly, so I just completed the third mission tonight before the show. The first mission, ton of outdoor environments, outdoor, indoor. You could go back outdoors. There was a certain level of like reasonableness to like total force size, right, for your opposing force. The other two missions, I'm like, you you got to be kidding me! Like, I have to cross like, the other one was like a town. I'm like, I've got to cross open streets to get to like another building that literally has like a Nazi watch stand in front of it. Like, well, how does that make sense? So where I break, and this is just me personally as a gamer, like I said, stealth is not like super my bag, but also um it is possible that you could get through these missions like entirely right based on stealth, but like for me they would take twice as long, right? And we all know I'm not going to sit there and spend 3 hours, right, in a mission. I mean, they're taking like an hour plus as it is. So that to me is a little overly. I've definitely had to spend a lot of time kind of playing at Bogart, and just when stealth does get broken, I do try and evade, and do try to get back to cover and kind of allow the cooldown. There's a very much like a GTA kind of cooldown. Like, if enemies hear a sound, they will go to yellow alert, and you'll see their actual icons turn yellow. And then if they actually see you or detect bodies or whatever, then they'll go to red. And then that does abate over time. I had a really nice kind of set piece where I got chased into a pub or a cafe, and and I found out that there was a wine cellar, and so I went down in the wine cellar, and like there were just dozens of Nazis right up on the upper main level, but none of them realized that there was this wine cellar except like one Nazi who came down, and I took him out, but nobody else came down. Um, so there's a bit of a feeling of kind of overwhelmingness in the sheer scope and scale of the individual maps. Um, for objectives, I mean, many was the time, I mean, especially tonight, that I would see the objectives, and then it would roll to the next one, and like when my extraction points came up this time after I completed the last objective, they were all around like the edges of the map in the complete opposite side of the map. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me, you know? Which I don't think that happens all the time because it wasn't like that the first time. Um, but but sometimes the sheer scope and scale of the maps, are a little bad. Level design, I would say the key thing, and this happens a little bit in Avowed too. There's also not really a good way, like at the system level in terms of mechanics, in order for you to tell, like, if you have an objective that's in like a 5 level building, like any notion of on which of those 5 levels your objective is. So I actually what's it tonight? Maybe it was the mission before. So it was maybe the mission I played yesterday. Um no, it was the mission tonight. Building's 4 levels, right? Big open area. It's like a hotel. So big open area. And then the other 3 levels above it, maybe it was 4 levels above it, um, were incomplete floors. So it was a cathedral ceiling, right? From the bottom all the way to the top of the building. The other floors were like a ringed walkway right around all 4 sides, with rooms off to the side. And you were supposed to go in and find these plans for some secret weapon the Nazis were building. So, the alert goes off, the people are flooding in there. I have to fight from floor to floor to floor to floor, and try and stay right undetected. And so, it's constantly a game of cat and mouse of like, you take out some people on some floors, then you either booby trap or hide the bodies so that, tons of people don't come up to the upper floors. So I do that. At one point, you actually, a way to get around a level, you actually have to um, hang off of a Windows ledge and then shimmy over, grab a pipe, and like climb vertically to get to the next floor. So I finally find like there were 2 plans supposedly in this building. So the objective marker is just on the building. You have no idea what floor it's on. I finally find it like on the 5th floor. I find one. And then I'm like, okay, I didn't search the 2nd floor because I was just trying to like get away and remain undetected. So I work my way all the way down to the 2nd floor, search that entire floor, the thing's not there. And I'm like, are you telling me one of the plans is down the 1st floor? That's where like the entire like German garrison is patrolling. So I go down there, search that entire floor, it's not there. So finally I find out that this thing has a sub level. Right? I go down there and I find it, and I'm like, you sent me into a like 6-story building to find 2 things. Right? And any breaking of stealth, right, floods the building with it. Like that's I'm gonna give that the stink eye a little bit. But there are some upsides. I think while this game isn't necessarily graphically gorgeous in terms of like a Spider-Man or Horizon Forbidden West or things like that, the graphic chops are pretty solid, right? I mean, it's a good looking game. Like I said, it's not going to win any awards for anything like that, but it's definitely solid.
Yeah, looking at the screenshot, it definitely feels like it nails the aesthetic, right? And kind of happening in World War II Europe. It definitely has. I mean, there's a lot of browns in there, but that's kind of the traditional expected aesthetic for that kind of campaign.
Yeah. Pretty performant. I'm playing on a 25-inch 240 hertz monitor with a 3070 Ti. I'm getting often upwards of 150 160 frames per second. So the weird thing about the game is, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think it has any I'm trying to remember because I was trying to keep this straight between this and Avowed. I don't think it has any acceleration optimization features in it, so it doesn't have DLSS, FSR, XESS, or anything like that. But I do have everything cranked up, everything set to like epic levels of detail, field of view out at like 110 degrees. And like I said, I'm getting the frames per second that I am. So it definitely scales pretty well and is optimized pretty well across hardware. So there are some good things right in terms of the game. I mentioned the whole loadout. It does have skill tree and like progressions, and the progressions to me are actually impactful in terms of the game systems. Like many times you have progression that like it feels like it doesn't really matter in the game, but this one, like one of mine, allows me to an extra equipment slot, and so you have all the weapons, but then you have all the equipment too. So now I have like an additional equipment slot, which I can carry an additional type of equipment. One of them then says you can carry a greater quantity of like mines, and I think I have another one that gave me a greater quantity of some other equipment. One allows you to, when you become incapacitated, because you can take so much damage that you get knocked down and you're not able to fight until you bandage yourself up. There is a skill that says, okay, now when you're incapacitated, you can still fire a weapon. So if you have troops right on you, you could take some out and then bandage yourself up. And then I have another one that says, okay, once you get knocked down, you can apply a med kit. So it's actually like a second wind type of thing. So the skill tree and progressions are pretty neat. The mission structure, like I said, all the objectives I think are a little wonky. There are like bounties or like side missions within the mission, which I think are pretty neat. You will get told, hey, Intel says that there's that they've captured information on like certain specific resistance members, right? And so you go there and get those out of the police station or whatever, so they don't hunt down the resistance members. So there's that. But then there's also kind of, I call them bounties. They're not really bounties because they don't have a price on their head or anything, but you do have bounties, right? Where you have intel, and one of the ones was, and there's neat little stories behind like everything in there. Like it's 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 similar to kind of Avowed, where there's a lot of like prose that's been written around, an exposition that's been written around like magical weapons and stuff. There's structure and meat in here where in the second mission they tell you, hey, we have intel that I think his name is like Philo Rosen or whatever, who's like gosh, what he's I forget what they're called, but he's like the butcher, right, of the resistance, and like whenever he like discovers a resistance fighter, like he tortures them, and then like he's been known to have killed so many. So they say, and it's kind of neat. Like it's not just that he's there. It's the story behind it is, he was recently injured, and so he was sent to this garrison unit on light duty because they wouldn't have expected him to have encountered any combat there. So he's supposedly in this location, like locate him and track him out. And actually, that was in that set piece where I got trapped in the wine cellar, and it was kind of neat because I was over there trying to find him. Stealth got broken. The guys went to yellow alert. I took this one out, and I was like, crap, like when I get out of this basement, I got to find this guy. What was funny, it's a little gamey, right? But because when the Germans talk, I have subtitles on, and so you'll get a thing that says like German Gestapo or German soldier, right, or whatever, and then colon, then what they say. Well, in this instance, it said Philo Rosen, and then said what he said because he was a Gestapo officer, right? So I was like, oh, he's right upstairs. Right? Like, let me wait for this to cool down and then go up and get him. And so then I went up. And again, kind of game mechanics and set, like there's some niceness to this, right? So I come up into the pub, the staircase comes up behind the bar, so I'm crouched behind the bar. He can't see me, and so I'm able to mantle over the bar and take him down with a stealth melee kill, right? So it's just satisfying bit. In another instance, I was trying to find this resistance traitor. So there was a guy who had been part of the resistance, but then he became a sympathizer and sold the resistance out, got some members killed, and was now shacked up with the Nazis. And again, like had spooked a bunch of people. They'd gone to alert, and I just happened to run into him right while I'm outside fighting, right, trying to get back to like a stealth look. So there's some neat little things kind of in it from that perspective within the mission structure. So it's still, it's a fun game. It's pretty neat. Like I said, it's not gonna burn up, any fires or charts or anything, but I'm having a good time with it.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like, I mean, it's really engaged you from the way you're talking about it. Couple questions. Is it one, I totally know that I was thinking of a different game when I was thinking of kind of the sniper piece, because this is, as you're describing it, like a Metal Gear, or Hitman. Is it a totally open world? Do you feel you're like you can approach these missions in a variety of different ways, or do you feel like you're kind of funneled into certain paths, or does it have that kind of Hitman aspect of there are probably 6 different ways that you could attack this, depending on how you want to go, depending on what other things you found in the world? Is that kind of how the game is set up?
Well, that's some of the neatness of it, right? It's I definitely wouldn't call it open world, but it's definitely asymmetric, right? You have objectives. They're a mix. There are some objectives that you need to do in sequence, right? Because you're trying to find a person, and the only way you can find them is to so like there was one mission where the guy you were trying to find was actually trying to help the resistance, right? He was a Nazi officer who got a guilty conscience. But in order to find him, you had to like search his apartment, and then you had to search another place where he like stood watch and like gather all these clues to figure out where he was. So in those cases, some of those things, there are some dependencies. There might be 2 or 3 dependencies, and you can do those in whatever order you want. Then there's like the bounties, right? And those are like red objectives on the thing, and then there are kind of the intelligence gathering things, which will pop as blue. So you have a pretty healthy mix and variety of things you can do and things you can do in things you can do in different sequences. So yeah, you do have that difference in mission structure, and some of them, again, you will have options to either find somebody from a distance, right, and snipe them, or get up close and personal and do stealth melee. So yeah, you definitely have lots of different ways that you can go about things.
Neat. Final question: Are you this? What you're talking about is the campaign? Have you played any of the? It looks like there's a invasion. There's a multiplayer mode.
I have invasion turned off because I don't want other people coming in my game. I will probably never play multiplayer.
Okay.
Friend of the show and one of my co-hosts on other shows, Slow Mo Backslap. He and I think we briefly played co-op in Sniper 5, maybe. We definitely talked about it, but maybe we never got together. But like, I think he's the only other person like in my circle of friends that I even know like plays. So yeah. All right. So if that is all on that, we will go on to segment 2 and start talking about the news. DBQ, you have the first news story of the rundown.
Yeah, I'll take the first one here, as we're going to talk about Monster Hunter both in the news and a little bit more later in the show, as Game Logic talked about. One of the things I wanted to pull out here this week is Phoenix Labs is shutting down Dauntless. So Phoenix Labs, Dauntless is a Monster Hunter like, came out in 2018, I believe. This was their first game, and really kind of they launched first on the Epic store. They were one of the early kind of free-to-play games there after Fortnite. It was they were bought out in 2020 and then again in 2024. And we didn't talk about it on the show, but back in January, they had some massive layoffs, let go of most of their development team at Phoenix Labs. Phoenix Labs also came out with Fae Farm, kind of a farm life sim, in 2023. But Dauntless had been running for the past 6 years or so. So it is closing down, shutting down completely in May. So we'll talk about another game that's shutting down in May, which we've know about already, which is Multiverses. But in the week of lots of Monster Hunter press, I wanted to give a shout out to free-to-play version that did a lot pretty well. I enjoyed my time with it playing on PC and Xbox and Switch back in the late teens, in the first couple of years that it came out.
And this was a live service multiplayer, had some survival aspects to it.
Not really survival. It was a live service in terms of kind of, you had some battle passes. You had some microtransactions that were all cosmetic, mainly, as from what I can remember. But it was always a online kind of, you would go out into an instant space and have a handful of people that would be pulled in with you, who would be, you'd be tracking down a specific monster within that instant space. Very kind of Monster Hunt like in that aspect, and you'd come back to your central fort area to craft and upgrade and things like that.
Okay, very cool. Second news story in the rundown is continuing with the theme of tonight's show of Monster Hunter. Monster Hunter Wilds charges for character edit vouchers again, and players are frustrated. So I'll bring the story up on screen. This news story over at IGN by Eric Van Allen. Monster Hunter Wilds is out and millions of players are making their hunters. It might be worth spending some extra time in the character creator, though, as frequent, extensive edits can run up a tab. Character edit vouchers make a return in Monster Hunter Wilds, as pointed out by VGC, adding a microtransaction for returning to the creator screen. While smaller edits to your character, say hair color or voice pitch, won't consume a voucher, more extensive edits will require a voucher. Look, we talked extensively when we talked about Avowed, how one of the great things about Avowed is how it doesn't put a lot of negatively impacting quality of life stuff in your face. And I've got to say, this has got to be one of the most, like, and I'm not about greedy corporations and being nickel and dimed and complaining and belly aching about this stuff. Like, this is just a pain in the butt. Like, I appreciate. I mean, when we go back to Avowed, and I want to say, yes, when we talk about Avowed, and I think I talked to Innate about this a little bit on BRAP. One of the great things about Avowed is bows and arrows, right? You fire the bow, you don't have an arrow counter. Like, one of the biggest things that I used to hate about Diablo, and they used to do this back in the Diablo 2 days, was you would get a bow or you would get a crossbow, and then you would also have to have a quiver. And the quiver would have a quantifiable finite amount of ammunition in it. And so it was absolutely feasible for you to have a bow or a crossbow and to run out of arrows, and then for it to be useless, but then still have it occupying. So, like, I get it. I spent years and years, maybe a decade, playing Dungeons and Dragons. And for the purposes of a true tabletop role-playing game, all that realism and stuff is great. When it comes to video games and you are worried about finding the fun, and this is analogous to people who like racing games but don't like car simulations, right? Or people who like Ace Combat 7 but don't like Great Scott, like Digital Combat Simulator, where I got to break out a flight manual on a kneeboard just to start the aircraft. Like, those types of things are a pain. And so the notion here that and so what I love in role-playing games is I don't ever use it, but I do love in role-playing games where just arbitrarily, if you want to, in the middle of your campaign, you can just asynchronously go into the character editor and change the outlook of your character. Like, it's your story, right? And so if you decide in your mind you need your character's appearance to change and be different from what it was before, that should be okay. I don't know why you need to handcuff and gatekeep like a function like this. And I could understand. I mean, I think in games more like Skyrim, I would say, or other RPGs where maybe your appearance, in terms of like your race, ethnicity, or whatever, have some bearing on the game and how characters react to you. That would be different. But I'm not deep into Monster Hunter, and I'm not a person who's spent a lot of time playing a ton of Monster Hunter games. But I don't think your character appearance really has any bearing on the gameplay.
No, it's pretty cosmetic. I mean, it's not like your weapon class, which is very much about gameplay. But no, in terms of your character, I don't think. I mean, I guess technically the armor you get does impact with stats, but some of that is more cosmetic than anything.
Yeah, and so look, I mean, I get it. Some people are gonna say, "Oh, well, this is just part of Monster Hunter." I'm like, okay, but I get it doesn't have to be. Like, I just and then, as we often talk about mobile games, because we open up the show with a mobile game. Like, if you want to charge me for it, fine, but can you just charge me a flat fee so I can just pay it and not have to be bothered? I don't really care if you put a $10 kicker on it, right? For people to pay to be able to arbitrarily go in and edit their character whenever they want to. This is just a pain. And I called, and quite honestly, it shouldn't surprise me, because I called Capcom out for this on Dragon's Dogma 2 as well, right? For having microtransactions that gated things like fast travel. I'm like, you don't need to make things an inconvenience for a player to make the game seem worthwhile to them. I don't understand that. So DBQ, any comments on that one?
No, I think that is, I mean, it feels very restrictive. And I wonder if part of that ties in with our next game news story.
Yeah, so the next news story in the rundown is about the success of Monster Hunter. This news story over on Kotaku by Ethan Gatch. Monster Hunter Wilds explodes on Steam despite terrible user reviews. Sorry, I'm just trying to get this off the screen. Monster Hunter Wilds is out and off to a roaring start on Steam, already shattering previous records to become the series' most played PC launch to date. And that's all despite one of the lowest Steam review scores of any recent blockbuster due to optimization, performance issues, and other complaints. Officially the first massive release of 2025, Monster Hunter Wilds garnered over 700,000 concurrent players on Steam alone last night, peaking at 1.3 million and continuing to grow. It could seemingly double that by the time the weekend hits, putting it number 1 over the ubiquitous Counter-Strike 2, and potentially even beating out both Black Myth Wukong and Power World for the all-time number 2 spot on the Valve-owned storefront. So over the weekend, I saw it peak at number 2. It didn't overtake Counter-Strike over the weekend that I saw. This is walloping the performance of previous games in the series. Monster Hunter World peaked at around 330,000 concurrent players, and Monster Hunter Rise's full-time peak was 230K. I do think it's settled. I do think it captured number 2 highest played game of all time, I think. So I think it overtook Baldur's Gate 3 and the other titles that were running behind whatever the number 1 is. I don't know if it's a League of Legends or Counter-Strike. But I mean, this the main thing about this for me is that there is a running dialogue happening in the gaming community about hardware optimization for Monster Hunter. And this, in fact, he Nate's in the chat, a comment that he made is the one that's causing me to loosen my religious stance on Steam community user reviews, right? And I wrote about this on Twitter. You can definitely use Steam user reviews as a baseline litmus test. But if you only look at the metric and then you go down and look at the reviews and the ones that you're anecdotally looking at as an indicator of what's going on are peppered by, because the Steam user reviews at the bottom are split into 2 different columns. Granted, one is smaller than the other. One is about dual column width wide, and the other one is single column width. The dual column width wide one is the list of most helpful reviews. The single column width one is the most recent user reviews. And the way even I read the user reviews, I typically bracket left and right. And all I'm looking for the most recent red reviews that popped. So as you scan that, you could wind up looking at a number of the most recent ones. Now, the reason why I'm doing that is because I'm actually reading the reviews, right? So I'm breaking the first totem, right, which is not just looking at the score, because the score tells you one thing, but it doesn't tell you why. Then if you go down and read them, I think you have to be particular about how you read them. Because as also a friend of the show who sometimes comes to the chat, Paul's Gaming Live mentioned, when you look at those reviews, you don't see the person's hardware behind it. And one of the things Nate mentioned on social media was that the people who are having problems with this game and a large clump of the people making complaints are people who are running on hardware that either isn't appropriate or is just, yes, it's going to cause you problems because it's older hardware. I'm personally running the game on an AMD Ryzen 9 7950X, an NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3080 Ti, and 64 gigabytes of RAM.
Is it supposed to be optimized better for one graphics card over another, or is it?
That tends to always be the case. Like just like in software development, like in game development, there was some skew that they picked to prioritize, right? To spend more time
that's
on.
their target development. Yeah.
And sometimes that's driven by the market. Sometimes it's also driven by coding complexity. And this is why you wind up with so many games who wind up targeting FSR over DLSS. Obviously, NVIDIA has the overwhelming bulk of market share, but FSR is open source. It works on both NVIDIA and AMD cards. I've never used a Battle Mage card, but I would assume that it could also work on an Intel card because anybody should be able to use that technology. So, and if I'm not sure if I don't know if NVIDIA has a DLSS that runs on Linux, but then for people who are gaming on Linux, FSR is available also. So there's lots of times that technology gets prioritized over DLSS, right? And DLSS winds up coming later. So I'm not sure. I am using DLSS in the game. I initially tried using DLAA, and I actually got lower frame rates. So flipping over to DLSS, I think I have that one in quality mode. I have NVIDIA Reflex turned on, and I have ray tracing enabled. and I'm getting in the realm of like 70 to mid 70 frames per second. Friend of the show, Priscilla, mentioned that she is playing on a 4000 series card. I want to say she's on a 4080 Super, maybe. And she was getting 90 frames per second. So I'm like, okay, you're a generation ahead, a skew above me. You're getting 20 frames per second. That passes the smell test, right? That to me seems like about where you would reasonably expect it to land. So this is an instance where I'm like, the Steam community review scores and hardware performance don't necessarily sync up by any means with regards to the concurrent user numbers that we're seeing, which again, this is not a free to play game. There's no way for you to be counted in one of those concurrent numbers unless you have bought the game, right? Minus the handful of people who have the review code. So we'll see how this continues over time. The one thing that doesn't make me happy about it is I checked in on Dragon's Dogma 2, which I would have thought and would have hoped Capcom would have corrected their sins of the past with that game, with regards to that game's performance, and that appears to not be the case. So I don't know if I have super high hopes for Monster Hunter World to become a little more ubiquitous and kind of how it levels out from a performance perspective. I know that for me and the hardware that I'm on, it's fine. The game,
if I remember correctly, like Worlds struggled a little bit at launch in terms of some of its performance, but over time it really wasn't until the Iceborne or the expansion when things really kind of cleaned up and smoothed out, from what I remember.
Yeah, that wouldn't necessarily surprise me. So there's a lot of dialogue going on where, in my opinion, people are cherry picking. Like, first of all, in my personal opinion, this whole thing of comparing screenshots of games is just a maliciously silly pastime, right? That is not a useful application of anybody's time. So there's a lot of that going on, and there's a lot of cherry picking the screenshots from people who are having problems with the game, right? So again, I'm not here to say that that performance is acceptable, but like I said, but the thing that's clouding up what ground truth is from a data centric perspective is that you have a lot of people running into problems and a lot of people taking those screenshots who aren't on the right hardware, aren't following the guidelines, also haven't gone into the configuration settings, right, to set things right in a reasonable manner for them to get decent performance, intermixed with a lot of people who are doing what they should be doing. And so that's just causing a skewed view, right, with a lack of certainty over what exactly is going on. Again, from my personal perspective, I'm getting frames in the 70 to 75 range, but I have everything cranked up, right? Ray tracing on medium. So for people who aren't familiar with the PC gamer paradigm, the thing is if you want more frames than that, then you turn stuff down. But I know that I'm seeing a few instances of where people just refuse, right? And then there are the group of people who are like, if it's not 120 frames per second, then it's a problem. That's a correction I had to make in my own paradigm, right, in which I approach PC games. I had to get myself out of if it's not 160 frames per second, then I'm not satisfied, right? So I can't comment on what everybody else's experience is. We'll talk about my own experience within Monster Hunter Wilds a little bit later, but I think there's definitely some cloud in the soup on what exactly is going on, which if if the game were a travesty and it were completely bad, you wouldn't see the number of concurrent players, right, that you see on it. So somewhere somebody is figuring things out. Yeah, so Warwa was saying he's getting 60 to 90 frames per second in Wilds at 1440 with DLSS. So, and I'm not sure if you're talking about me or Innate or Priscilla. Innate is getting the highest frame rates. He's on a 4090. So he's actually having no problems. I will say also, I can't perfectly remember my Afterburner specs, but I'm pretty sure this is the game that I'm getting that in my GPU. But first of all, I'm not nearly approaching the VRAM threshold because they have a meter in the settings in the game. and the GPU temperature is like 35 degrees C. So my GPU is not working hard, right, to maintain that frame rate. So, but what I will say I have noticed is there are there's some wonkiness in the settings, and for anybody who spends a lot of time on an NVIDIA GPU and with DLSS should be accustomed to that, particularly when a game launches. Like I said, there's some weird things that may be counterintuitive, right? Where you flip from one methodology to the other, and you get more frame rates, right, when you're not expecting it. One thing I also haven't done is I haven't looked into this game or seen if there's a way for me to do it in the panel. I guess I would need to be on a. I can't remember where. So NVIDIA has a new. I want to say it's an engine. I think it's a model. So they have a new model, I think called the Transformer model, and I don't know what cards that's on, but flipping that also can change to a significant degree how things perform. Not all games have that additional model enabled, so that's something I need to dig through the settings and take a look at. But the game's off to a great start. A cautionary tale is, give the game at least the full 30 days. So a lot of people were waving the boo on Capcom flag after the game had been launched for 24 hours. I don't think that's appropriate. But if you're concerned about slagging Capcom, cool your heels. You'll be able to do so, right? Looking at Dragon's Dogma 2, 30 days didn't do any help for Dragon's Dogma. So, just give it a month or two before we try and, render judgment of what exactly is going on. Next in the rundown is, it's actually me again.
It's you again. Yep.
So this is our, notice that as we, like Nintendo's kind of in a bathtub right now, right? Like until news starts coming out, which granted, we're probably only 30 days from starting to hear stuff about the Switch 2 as we get closer to the Nintendo Direct date. Is that April 2nd?
I believe April 2nd, yeah.
But we will get dwindling, less and less Nintendo Switch news as we've seen for the past few months. This news story over on The Verge is just very quick by Jay Peters. Nintendo Switch Online's first delisting. Super Formation Soccer is being pulled. Super Formation Soccer is being pulled from the service on March 28th, a Japanese Nintendo support account announced. The game, which seems to be owned by Spike Chunsoft and goes by Super Soccer in the US and Europe, will be removed from NSO Worldwide, Nintendo Switch Online Worldwide 2, Nintendo Everything reports. One of the things that makes this interesting to me is we've speculated a little bit about what was behind Nintendo's comment that some games will be backwards compatible on Nintendo Switch 2, right? Well, why wasn't it all? Why was that caveat there? And one of the things I speculated was that, well, maybe it's not just straight. Maybe there is something, yay, verily, it may be something small, may not be a huge level of effort, but maybe there's something that developers have to do to enable their game to play on Switch 2, right on Switch. And I commented about how so much of the library is mobile games that were made in Unity, right? And then ported to Nintendo Switch. There could be something that is not just push a button, right, to make it run on Nintendo Switch 2. So, and that may mean for mobile vendors, like there's no way to tell the mobile vendors, right, to make their game compatible.
So I think that's probably true for some of the games. This game, though, is this is an original Super Famicom, Super Nintendo game that is on the online. So it's part of, to me, this feels more like it's a licensing issue because I'm assuming most of the online stuff is all running in emulation in some capacity rather than, some of the mobile ported, fluff that's filler that's in the store, where I could see where some of those things could have hardware conflicts, where this feels almost more license-like because it is on the online program or service, which we've seen this, it's surprising because it's an older game. Like, it's not surprising when it is something that's coming off of PlayStation Plus or Game Pass. We see things coming in and out of those services on a monthly basis.
Yep. So yeah, I mean the causality could be one, both, either, or a mix between the two. I think what I would do is I'm still interested in kind of keeping an eye on if we like so somewhere based on that caveat, and as well as like this licensing stuff with the online stuff, but with specific regards to Switch 2, we should see or hear about the games that aren't going to be playable on Switch 2, right? And be able to start making some assessments about why that's going on. So it'll just be interesting. One of the most exciting times in watching the gaming industry is when new hardware is coming out. So
So
we
very
will keep that up
true.
to date. All right, DBQ.
All right, so we
Last
started the
story.
news segment off with a studio closure, so let's end it with one as well. This week, Warner Brothers Games announced that they're shutting down 3 studios. So this article comes from Justin Carter over at Game Developer. 2 of those 3 studios are Player First Games, which is the developer of Multiverses, which you already know that Multiverses is closing at the end of May. Again, this is somewhat surprising, given that WB Games just purchased Player First Games last year. And then the other studio is the long held and kind of legacy studio of Monolith. Monolith goes all the way back into the late 90s. We had, on the show, we've spent plenty of time lamenting the fact that No One Lives Forever is lost in licensing somewhere. Same with No One Lives Forever 2. Monolith Soft also did Fear and Fear 2. They did the Guardians of Middle Earth mobile game. And then, of course, they did Middle Earth, Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War. And we're in the process of working on Wonder Woman, which was hopefully, the speculation was that it was going to incorporate the Nemesis system from those Middle Earth games, but that game has been canceled and the studio is now being closed as well.
They also made the Lift Tech engine, which was not widely used by a lot of other vendors, but
That's right. Wow, I forgot about that. Yeah.
So you used to, if you played an older Monolith game, there would be that little Lift Tech rolling promo like at the beginning of the game. So it's something that's very much buried in my memory. So there have been a lot of studio closures, a lot of layoffs. I've always felt a certain way about all of them, but Monolith is one of my studios that is in my top 5 studios of all time, which it has been a very difficult for me to neck down to even what those 5 studios are. So for one of those studios to now be wiped off the map, particularly now when we have it, because I've been clamoring for years that we need a remake of a remaster, at least, of No One Lives Forever, No One Lives Forever 2. I mean, not only did that game is it caught in licensing hell, but like it never even made the digital transition. Like
No,
the game was pretty much imprisoned on CDs, DVDs. So yeah, this is rough. And I know there's been a lot of commentary about like how, like, as is the case with tons of other studios like BioWare and the Back for Blood guys, right? That, like, how those teams are not really the teams that like you're thinking of, right? But because so many people have left and there's been so much turnover, and I get that, but yeah, at the end of the day, it's the name and the pedigree. We just had a news story where 4A Games, who are the guys who make the Metro series, that there was a brief moment in time where there was a ton of fear and anxiety because 4A Games had rebranded. And I was like, whoa, like the Metro series is like hugely important, like, but everybody went to general quarters over that, and the story's a little different. But but here again, we have a studio that at least for me, and I get not everybody was a huge fan of Monolith games and probably doesn't even know what Monolith was, but for me, a studio that is a significant representation of, you know, the last 20 years of my gaming life, you know, and now they're no more, and that's rough.
Yeah, if you were PC gaming in the early 2000s or mid 2000s, between No One Lives Forever, Condemned, Fear, there were some solid games that came out there during that time. And so people that only know their Middle Earth, and again, those are really solid two published games as well, but they had quite a portfolio leading into the 360 PlayStation 3 era and generation.
Yeah, Shadows of War for me was kind of almost like Far Cry 5 was for me, like before Far Cry 5 came along. It was just one of those games I like kept going back to, and kept, loving the time that I spent in it, regardless of, playing through the entire campaign, just loved being immersed in the Nemesis system. And
Yeah, and the world that they created,
yeah,
there's a lot of meat in those two games.
yeah. Anything else on that one, DBQ?
No, let's round the corner and catch the last three.
Yep. So on to segment 3, to round out the remainder of our gaming experience story and what we've been playing this past week. I've been spending some additional time in Avowed. I've enjoyed it. Similar to Sniper Elite Resistance, the tell of the tip on Sniper Elite Resistance, I've spent enough time in it that now I'm starting to see kind of some of the tattered edges. And some of those things are okay. Like, again, it's not I don't, Avowed's not going to be game of the year. I don't think it needs to be in that discussion. So my criticisms of it are also not about, right, it being a bad game, right? It's just, some things that are, whatever. What I've complimented Avowed on more than anything is just that ease of being able to get into the game, and not putting a lot of stuff in front of your face. Um, and so that continues to be the theme. There are a few things that kind of break that suspension of disbelief. Um, this is one of those games. Was it Skyrim or Oblivion or maybe even Morrowind that you could just basically go into anybody's house and take anything, and there were no like repercussions from that?
It might be all the way back to Morrowind, because at some point they started like you would be a threat meter. Yeah, this game is very much it is a video game, right? There is no stealing. Like when I read that online, I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm just gonna grab everything I can, because normally you would kind of pick and choose what you could pick up based on the fact that somebody could see you.
Yeah, and I forget what other game I was playing recently before this one, where like there would be like a red indicator, right, for like a thing that like, hey, if you take this, and I don't so much mind that
Sounds like
there's
a Fallout when they were have that.
it could
I mean,
be,
I know Fallout had it, but whether or not that was that, but definitely some Bethesda games had that kind of red meter when you would be seen, or it would, kind of put you in the negative. Yep.
Yeah, and I don't need stealth in the game, but when you commit an act like right in front of a person, just for them to say nothing to you, just again breaks that suspension of disbelief, right? In this case, I had gone to see, I can't remember what her name is, Runda, something, the Watcher, who's supposed to like give you like deep insight into kind of what's going on with you spiritually, and this voice talking in your head, and
Yep.
help give you some information to help you track down, hopefully the people who tried to kill you. And uh and then like she sits down at her desk, and I like just took like fruit and food off of her plate, like right in front of her, and I'm like, it would have been a nice touch just for her to say, feel free to take anything you need, or something. But then I also went upstairs to her bedroom and like read her journal. And she has like a little I forget what those things are called, but like a little
It's a little screen by the bathtub. Is that
yes,
what you're
yes,
thinking?
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, 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 yeah. And I go behind her bath, like, and like, it would have been, feel free to go up to my room, whatever, like, just something. So, again, like a minor thing. I think the other thing that kind of bothers me is because I've mentioned this with like Sony's design ethos that is around this thing that they call what do they call it? Wide path We used to talk
Mm-hmm.
about this a few years ago, but like it's the thing that's not open world, right? But they had to market it and brand it as not just not open world. It's wide path near linear storytelling, right? Which is this design pattern that's designed to make you feel like you're immersed in a world, but to have guardrails around it, like so it's not open world and you are constantly kind of being funneled right forward in a direction. And so there's some minor uh path blocking, pathfinding things that like there's I've encountered places where like you can, like in one instance I'm on the dock, I'm able to mantle up to a railing, but I can't, but there's like a shopkeeper right set up in front of this railing. So so I can't, the game's not allowing me to like break their like wooden stands where like they have all their wares right draped down. And I'm like, and I'm doing this so I don't have to run like all the way around, right, and come up to this pavilion area, right? And so is
Breaking
it,
the immersion is one thing if you're like snooping through somebody's bedroom, but if you can't break through somebody's sales, like
yeah,
yeah.
so this is a pet peeve of mine, right? And the pet peeve is like where the consistency drops away. Like again, it's I'm not, this isn't the argument of like the people who like get frustrated because like you can't explode fruit in like a game. I think that was Halo or maybe Halo Infinite or Master whatever. Like that's not the point. The point is that there are other instances in which you allow me to break wood, right? You do allow me to break like where wood planks are covering like the opening to like a cave or a hallway or something like that. This is the same type of wood, but for some reason you're not letting me break it, regardless of whether or not I put like a huge war hammer on it or whatever. So just some minor things like that, like I said, kind of fraying around the
Sure.
edges.
Spider webs are the same way, right? Like some you can burn, some you can't. Yep. It
Yeah,
depends if it has an icon, basically.
yes. Or you can't cut them. Right, right. Like I get that they're spider webs. I get they're stronger that
They
like, but
stick to your dagger. That's icky. Yeah. Oh, nobody wants
yeah.
that.
And that's another thing. Like I talk about like how the game doesn't like put a lot of things like quality of life is good. Quality of life aspects that I don't like is like having to break out my grimoire to like burn spider webs, right? Which causes me to display something that I currently have in one of my two loadouts and then flip it back right as I proceed. And it's a minor thing, but that's kind of where some of the edges are fraying, right? In terms of there being a super degree of polish, right? Like there are just things that they didn't do, and I'm sure that was to manage level of effort and overall scope, and that's fine. But that also doesn't mean that they're going to wind up being ignored, and it's not going to make somebody feel a certain way and kind of be bothered and shake their head. Um, but in general, I'm having fun with it. I guess another thing that I dislike on PC at least is I'm playing mouse and keyboard, and I just realized today one of the things I really don't like is because I was involved in a couple of fights where I'm having to spam healing potions. There is one instance where you get one of these four magical weapons that you get in the openings of the game that are oriented around like these four. I can't remember if they're gods or if they were just like four elemental champions, where like the little story lore behind them is each season, three of them stayed awake and allowed the fourth one to rest. And so all four of them made some type of magical weapon so that while they were asleep, right, and not guarding like their little part of the garden or whatever, that like, champions or whatever who wandered through could use their weapon, right, if they needed to, you know, fight off monsters or something like that. So
Wow, look at you. I haven't even read into the lore like that. That's
yeah. So I found two of these four weapons. I have like the fire dagger and like
okay.
the axe that causes like freezing damage.
Hmm.
But when you find the axe, like these I can't remember if they're skeletons or goblins or something, like come rising up out of the water. And it seems like maybe the whole point of that thing is to force you to use the axe and like get used to it, because I don't know that you can defeat that thing. Like the waves seem endless. So finally I just had to leave. But in the course of that, I wound up like using up all my health potions. On PC, when you go into the weapon wheel, there's no way to get out of the weapon wheel other than hit the escape button. Now maybe I can remap it. I haven't tried that. But what that causes is if you are being attacked, or if there's an enemy who's close into you, and you go into the weapon wheel because you're out of potions, and now you need to like eat fruit or something like that to get health back. It just causes this thing where like I can't reach up and hit the escape key if as soon as I come out of escape, I need to dodge left, right? And so for me in combat, because I'm right-handed, like for whatever, like a lot of my evasion patterns wind up leaving enemies on my right because I'm constantly maneuvering to the left. So it just seemed, so I was just in this do loop of like every time I hit escape to come out of the weapon wheel where I was trying to get my health back up, I would wind up getting hit by a monster because I couldn't get my finger down quick enough, right, to continue the dodging movement. So again, it's a minor thing, but it is a thing that's like on the ragged edge of, you know, causing me some saltiness, right, while I'm playing the game. But I have met the third companion, so I've met the dwarf, and so that's actually making combat a little easier.
The dwarf he's your second companion.
Well,
I only have two companions.
I count Garrick as the first.
Oh, okay.
So when you come off the shipwreck,
the
right,
little fuzzy guy,
the little hairy guy, right, because he fights alongside you for the opening sequence until you get to Paradise. But yeah, I'm continuing to have a good time with it. I love finding treasure here in the little Fortnite kind of tinkle. Treasure is nearby. So yeah, and the last thing I'll say that breaks the immersion a little bit too. There's a little bit of NPCs not being aware of the world around them. Like in one instance, I like literally passed right by a guard gate and like immediately turned the corner and there's a whole camp of enemies there. And I'm like, dudes, did you not, like, how are there, like, so, you know, again, that's a little thing. I'm also tending to kill a lot of people that you interact with, where it gives you options to either partner up with them or kill them. I think this will be the last kind of like slightly immersion breaking thing too. The other thing that broke immersion for me a little bit is you get involved in a fight, in an interior fight, in a public space, and I thought when I made the choice to engage in combat, I just assumed everybody was going to be no weapons and it was just going to be a fist fight, right? Everybody breaks weapons out, and I'm like, we are literally like in something that's the equivalent of like a shop here, and like we're swinging battle axes and two-handed hammers and lighting off magic spells. I'm like, it was a little much. And the other people who were in the space didn't react at all. You know, they just kept drinking their drinks. And I'm like, even in a gunfight, like in the Old West Saloon, like, you remember everybody just stands up, backs up, flips their tables over, you know, but like, so that was a little much too. But everything outside of that, again, these are the small, like, you know, tattered edges that I'm picking at. Overall, I'm still having fun playing the game.
I am just in love with this game, and I think I'm smiling as you're talking about it because I don't know that I've had that experience. Like, I didn't have a fight in the middle of a store. Like, I talked my way out of something, or I didn't get maybe my quest was totally different. You know, I have finished out the first act. I've gone through, found my killer, finished that story where you do get some choices about how you're going to take on that fight, or a couple different fights there. I find myself that I am at the point where I'm ready to go on to the next chapter, go to the next space, but I am working my way through just uncovering the rest of the map, the spaces in the map and that opening space that that are still kind of foggy. Going back through, finding them. I've found all 6 of the like Mordecai statues that you in your camp. You know, each one that you get gives you a buff. And went back and found most of those. Only one was really kind of tricky. But the rest were, you know, just kind of exploring around. And I find the exploration aspects really enjoyable. It is, you're right. It is very much a video game. And there are plenty of times where it allows the lack of immersion for the smoothness of gameplay. But I appreciate that. This is very much, it's scratching that kind of big open world itch in terms of just exploring and finding. Uh, I'm realizing it took me a little bit to get all my weapons up to the second tier, like the fine tier, the blue tier. Because as I was out exploring and running into enemies who were in that second tier, I was just kind of chipping away at them, and it was much easier to die. So yeah, there's a lot here. I've enjoyed the choices and the dialogue. Again, the story stuff. One of the things, as I've been out exploring, my quest log and my side quests are all cleared out, but I come across a note that says this person is looking for challengers, and found my way there. And it's not an actual quest, and actually the reward was pretty minor, but if I would have found it early in my game, it could have been very helpful. But it's just kind of neat like that there are certain things that are not popping on your screen as quests, but they're still kind of out there in the world to discover.
Yeah, I think the only other negative thing I'll say is also the interludes with the spirit voice in your head. To me, are like overly verbose, like edging towards like JRPG exposition, right? And I'm like, just some of those cutscenes I've been in, and I'm just like, okay. Now that all being said, right? This is because I was where you were, where I was like super positive about the game, and I didn't have anything negative to say about the game. So again, these are small little nits that are an explanation of why the game is an 8 on Metacritic, right? And not higher. But I'm playing, I'm playing Sniper Elite Resistance right now, Civilization 7, Monster Hunter Wilds, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, and Avowed. And of all those games, Avowed is still my favorite one out of those 5 that I'm playing. So don't.
Well, let's hear a little bit about your Monster Hunter experience, since we've talked about plenty of other Monster Hunter news this week. But as we close out,
yeah, and we're 10 minutes over time, so I'll make this quick. I actually don't have a lot to say, which is why originally I had this at the top of the rundown of the show, and then I moved it back here to the back end. Most of what I have to say about Monster Hunter World, I think we covered it a little bit earlier, because we're really about the performance, right, that I'm seeing from testing and looking at it in Afterburner and playing around with the settings. So I'm still kind of getting my feet wet and completing my onboarding. I will say, I wrote a thing on Twitter about how finding the fun in a game has very much to do with onboarding. And of those 5 games, there are some that I've completed my onboarding and some that I haven't. And the ones that I currently feel like are the most fun are the ones that I've completed my onboarding, right? Because they don't have a ton of obstacle course mental gymnastics right in my face. I'm not done with onboarding on Monster Hunter yet. I'm not done onboarding in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, right? And Monster Hunter, like, there's no negative fun impact just yet. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, that is a game that I'm just not having as much fun with off the bat, because there is that mountain of stuff. But like I said, other than Monster Hunter Wilds looks gorgeous right now. I do like the characters that I've been exposed to. Just as far as like the variance right in their characterizations and how they react in the world. I'm using Lance as my primary weapon right now, which is not an approach I've ever used in a Monster Hunter game before. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. And DBQ, you have the last news story. I'm actually happy because I considered picking this up instead of Monster Hunter Wilds just because of where the Steam reviews were. So I'm very interested to hear how this game's going for you.
For the sake of time, I'll be relatively brief. So I picked up, after playing through the demo on PC and Xbox and PlayStation. So this is PGA Tour 25. The demo, you hit a level cap, get your character up to level 10, and only up to like 70 overall, and then you kind of hit a ceiling. And so once you have the full game, and I ended up I didn't buy the early editions for significant money, and found something in terms of a deal, and could pick it up and play the game upon full release. One of the things, it's great. I mean, I love, as I talked about it during the first first look, the swing system in this game is better than any other modern golf game that I've played. 2K21, 23, PGA Tour from EA from 23. It's the best that the golf club has put together. The the HP Studios. It is, but it's also, depending on your difficulty, can be not forgiving at all. That, during the demo, I played, up to pro, and there's also legend and master. I've had to knock it back down, even at pro am, which is kind of like the third tier up. It is any deviation to the left or right on your swing, right? Because your stroke is, you're pulling down on a stick and pushing back up, and anything just slightly to pull it to the draw or fade feels accentuated the higher the difficulty goes. So and that's also one of the things that in your skill tree you can level those things up, or you can unlock, you can put your skill points as you level up into some of those things so that it's more forgiving. So or that both you have your skill tree that you can make a little more unforgiving, and then also your attributes, your character attributes, you can choose where you're leveling up, that your downswing can be a little, your timing can be a little more forgiving, or your forward swing can be a little more forgiving, the draw fade can be a little more forgiving, and some of that is a trade-off, that your total power may decrease, or your total accuracy may decrease a little bit when you do that. So starting off the game, you're kind of from a deficit in terms of some of that. If you're trying to play at a higher difficulty, pro is what the online is set at right now. I'm playing below that. I'm alternating between pro am and pro am and amateur, just to get back into the swing. One of the things I forgot after playing so much of the demo is that there was no wind in the demo. So suddenly you're out on the course, and I'm having to readjust, which is great on wind. So it's got a lot of there's a lot of potential for mastery there, that if I'm playing on amateur, I'm getting a lot of bogeys and pulling ahead in the leaderboard. And when I move to pro-am, if I'm not paying really tight attention, it's really easy to get a bigger draw or fade, at least this early in the game, potentially as my character levels up. Again, this is a 2K game, so there is, you're getting virtual currency to level up your character. You can buy that, but it's also, you earn it pretty well throughout, playing in the career and the tours. I definitely feel like I'm getting a satisfactory enough that I'm able to kind of stay competitive. But one of the things that I've found, and there was a patch right around release, is that they kind of nerfed some of the XP and the virtual currency that you earn through some of the quests, so that your progression is slowed down a little bit. So for the first week of early access, it was a higher amount of virtual currency that was awarded, and now that's been pulled back. I think it pulled back from 120 to 90, kind of the percentage there. So not a huge amount, but definitely significant for people jumping on. But again, you can experience the game and play the game just as a golf game without having to, if you're not going to be similar to the NBA 2K series, if you're not going to be out and playing online, and just play the sport there, you don't have to invest any money to really enjoy the sport. And they really nail from my criticism of New Star Retro Slam Tennis at the beginning, they nail the in-game actions, and playing golf is one of those where I can turn the difficulty down if I just want something relaxing at the end of a night, and if I want to kind of work on my skills, I can turn the difficulty up and do that as well. And so it's nice when a game can be both relaxing and intense depending on where you're at with a mood, which feels about right for golf, actually.
So my only question on this one tonight. So you're playing this on Xbox Series S?
No, sorry, it's just Xbox Series is what I put in the. So yeah, on the Series X. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Very cool.
So I'm playing it in performance mode. Playing it on a 4K HDR looks really good. Courses are beautiful. Graphics are great. And back to your question from the first look from a couple of weeks ago, there are more than one announcer, and so the announcing is a little more varied than it was in the first look. So I'm finding that actually paying attention as well.
All right, very cool. Well, I hope you bring this one back for additional updates in the rundown, because I have this one wish listed, and so when I get a little time opened up in my schedule, I'll probably want to take a look at it.
Yeah, it's definitely one that's going to stick with me.
Speaking of time in your slate, in your schedule, let's talk very quickly about significant releases coming out this week for the week of 3 March 2025. Only two ones that really tipped my radar. I mean, there's additional smaller stuff coming out, but first one is Age of Mythology Retold for the PlayStation 5, coming out on the 4th of March. I have yet to understand why that game is coming to PlayStation 5. I know Microsoft often touts that these RTSs they see do well when they hit Xbox and Game Pass. The viability of this on PlayStation, I'll be interested to see if it takes off. This is a game that I have. I love Age of Mythology. To me, the notion of it going to PlayStation 5 is dubious, but we'll see. The only other big title is a big title because it comes from a development studio that is a former Game of the Year winner. Joseph Fair's new game from, what's the studio called? Is it Horizon? Hazelight, from Hazelight Studios.
Yes. Yep. This is the Brothers and No Way Out, and It Takes Two.
And so the game that'll be coming out next week from them is Split Fiction, coming out for PC, PlayStation 5, and Xbox Series X or S. So this will be a 9th gen console release only for now. I would be very surprised if this game doesn't wind up on Switch too. Coming out on March 6th. So that's Thursday.
Yep. Yeah,
so,
I would assume that it probably would get a port eventually. It Takes Two got a port to Switch, and it originally just came out on Xbox One and PlayStation 4. So,
yep.
The game coming out this week is a remaster. So Suikoden 1 and 2, the remaster of those JRPGs back from the late 90s and early 2000s are coming out on the 6th as well.
Yeah. So I haven't specifically checked. Maybe you have, but I would assume Split Fiction will once again be a game that if one person buys it, they'll be able to on the same platform. The other person will be able to share.
I think so. That there's a friend pass type of thing. Yeah.
So, and what did we say the other two games were before? The two, I mean, Brothers was there, but the other two modern ones.
It Takes Two was the prison breakout one, and then No Way Out was the prison breakout, and It Takes Two was the husband and wife kind of working through divorce platformer to some degree.
Yeah, so It Takes Two is the one that has seen a resurgence in sales over the last few weeks, theoretically coming from word of mouth of the impending release of this game. Again, hopefully getting traction with gamers who skipped it, and then going on to have a good revenue tail in the out years, right, by the bump coming on from the game. So again, not so much on this show, but we talk about this on Basement Radio Arcade podcasts. People often say, well, why remakes, why remasters, why because if you're going to drop something else associated with that franchise, those things, right, get sales because people are getting excited about the notion of like the next thing that they're going to play, and they don't mind going back and playing something associated with it. So,
Warwana, thanks for the correction. Yes, it is A Way Out, not No Way Out. Yes.
Yep. So thanks a lot so much for everybody who was in the chat. Thanks so much, Warawana. We appreciate you. Nate, we appreciate you. Hero Down Under for coming through. We appreciate you as well. For anybody else who was in the live chat whose name I missed, it was not an intentional oversight. So please feel free to come back and continue watching the show. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Stay safe out there. Play the games that you like. Come here to talk to us about the games that you love. Once again, my name has been Game Logic from the Rounding Off Affinity Gaming channel on YouTube, here with DBQ Hams, who will be the host for next week, while Talmaster and I move over to the co-pilot seat. So we hope to see you guys back then. Next Sunday, the 9th of March, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're still not on daylight savings time. But yeah, come on back. Until next time, good night, good luck, and good gaming. That's going to do it for us, not for me. That's what I say on my other shows and my other live streams. I apologize. That's going to do it for us. Until next time, good night, good luck, good gaming. We're out of here.